The Boston winter sky was already growing dark, and the Christmas lights attached to the street trees had begun to shine. Mary Anderson glanced at the clock on her car's dashboard and let out a small sigh. She was 30 minutes late. Her mother Barbara was surely waiting with an unhappy face. "Mom, how much longer until we get to Grandma's house?" 10-year-old Amy looked up from the book she was reading in the passenger seat. Her large brown eyes held a mixture of expectation and anxiety. "About 10 more minutes, Amy," Mary answered with a smile. "Are you ready? It's been a while since you've seen Grandma, Grandpa, and Madison." Amy was quiet for a moment, then nodded silently. "I wonder if I can see Madison's new ballet shoes." Mary thought she caught a momentary cloud passing over her daughter's expression, but quickly responded in a cheerful voice. "Of course. And Grandpa will surely want to hear about your drawings." In her heart, Mary prayed that this Christmas vacation would pass peacefully. Though she was successful as an accountant and led an independent life, whenever she returned to her parents' home, she was always overcome with the same feeling of powerlessness she had as a teenager, especially in front of her mother Barbara. About 5 years ago, Mary had begun a separation from her husband David. His infidelity and financial irresponsibility were the reasons. Though the legal divorce had not yet been finalized, she was essentially living as a single mother. David only paid child support irregularly and had almost no contact with Amy. "There it is, Amy. I can see Grandma's house now." A large, New England-style White House came into view. Latticed lights shone in the decorated windows, and a beautifully adorned wreath hung at the entrance. Mary pulled over to the curb and turned off the engine. For a moment, she remembered the phone call at the office before departure. It was an important matter from a major client. She had really wanted to work properly until the end of the year, but her mother had strongly wished for Christmas with the whole family, and she couldn't refuse. The front door opened, and Mary's father Robert appeared. He was a gentle man characterized by his graying hair and warm smile. "Hey, you're here. Amy, Grandpa's girl has finally arrived." Amy leaped out of the car and ran toward Robert. He scooped up his granddaughter and spun her around. "How much you've grown, Amy. You're 10 now, aren't you? Quite the young lady." Mary watched her father and daughter while taking suitcases out of the trunk. At least her father remained kind. However, she sensed something troubled behind his smile. "Mary. You've finally arrived. You're past the agreed time." Barbara appeared at the entrance, directing a stern gaze at her daughter. She had styled her permed blonde hair and was wearing a warm cashmere sweater with a pearl necklace. Beside her stood Mary's sister Jennifer and her daughter Madison. "I'm sorry, Mom. A sudden work matter came up at the office," Mary apologized, but Barbara waved her hand dismissively. "Work, work, always work. Is it more important than family time?" Jennifer arrived yesterday morning. Mary took a deep breath to maintain her composure. Jennifer is a full-time housewife, so she has flexible time. "I have a job." "Mom," Amy called in a small voice. "May I say hello to Madison?" Mary gently stroked her daughter's shoulder. "Of course." Amy approached Madison and shyly waved. "It's been a while, Madison." Madison looked at Amy from under her eyelashes and barely nodded. Her new dress and ballet shoes were clearly expensive. "Madison, don't you have something to say to Amy?" Jennifer gently pushed her daughter's back. "Hello, Amy," Madison finally spoke. "Your dress is cute. Did you buy it on sale?" Jennifer giggled, and Barbara smiled. Mary felt angry, but before she could speak, Robert intervened. "Well, everyone, let's go inside. It's cold out here. Amy, would you help Grandpa carry your luggage?" Inside, a large Christmas tree was decorated in the living room. Several gifts were already placed beneath it, with a notably large box that appeared to be for Madison. A small package for Amy was visible, just one, tucked away behind the tree. As Barbara led Mary to the dining room, she said in a low voice, "I really wanted you to come earlier. I wanted help preparing the Christmas dinner for Madison. She's such a special child, and Jennifer is working so hard." Amy is a very special child too, Mom, Mary quietly objected. Yes, of course, Barbara replied dismissively. But Madison won a ballet competition. Your child. She paused for a moment as if searching for words. Likes art. Mary inhaled deeply, sincerely wishing for a peaceful Christmas. However, when she returned to the living room, she encountered Madison dropping Amy's picture book on the floor and saying sorry in an obviously insincere way. This is going to be a long 3 days, Mary resigned herself. On Christmas Eve night, a flickering flame illuminated the fireplace in the Wilson home, casting warm light throughout the living room. The family had settled into their respective places, with a traditional Christmas atmosphere hanging in the air. Yet beneath the calm surface flowed a definite tension. Robert sat in an armchair beside the fireplace, slowly swirling whiskey in his glass. His gaze was directed at the flames, but his eyes seemed to be looking at something far away. Mary observed her father with concern. His usual jokes and cheerful topics were few tonight, and he wore a brooding expression. Dad, are you okay? Mary rose from the sofa and moved closer to her father. Robert smiled as if coming back to himself, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Oh, it's nothing. When you get older, Christmas becomes a season of memories. Barbara and Jennifer continued their conversation loudly at the dining table while looking through Madison's photo album. This photo is from Madison's ballet recital. Her teacher says she has special talent, Jennifer said proudly. Of course, Barbara responded while patting her granddaughter's head. She has my blood. Do you remember when I took dance lessons in my youth? Amy sat alone near the Christmas tree, drawing something in the sketchbook she had brought. Sometimes she would glance in Madison's direction, but quickly return to her drawing. Mary's heart ached at her daughter's lonely figure. Amy, what are you drawing? Mary sat next to her daughter. A Christmas picture, Amy answered in a small voice. I want to show it to Grandpa. Hearing this, Robert stood up from his chair and came to Amy's side. Let me see, Amy. Amy hesitantly opened her sketchbook. It showed a colorful Christmas tree with the family gathered around it. Robert's eyes lit up at the carefully detailed drawing. This is wonderful. You really have talent. Robert said as if genuinely moved. Madison, why don't you play with Amy? Robert suggested. You're both the same age, it should be fun. Madison made a displeased face but reluctantly walked toward Amy at her mother's urging. What do you want to play? Draw pictures. Amy suggested hopefully. I brought extra drawing paper. Boring, Madison immediately refused. I want to watch videos on my tablet. Madison, Robert said in a gentle but firm voice. Christmas is a time to spend with family. Why don't you spend a little time with your cousin? Madison grudgingly agreed and began looking at Amy's sketchbook. However, her face clearly showed dissatisfaction. Within minutes, Madison suddenly dropped Amy's sketchbook on the floor. Sorry, my hand slipped, Madison said unapologetically and returned to Barbara and Jennifer. Amy silently picked up her sketchbook and gently smoothed the wrinkled pages. Mary felt her face growing hot with anger, but Robert placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll talk to them, Robert said as he headed toward Barbara and Jennifer. However, before he could say anything, Barbara spoke up. Let's have dinner now. A special Christmas Eve dinner. The table was set with roast turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and cranberry sauce. Barbara proudly surveyed the table. Jennifer and I prepared it since this morning. All Madison's favorite recipes. Mom, it's a lovely dinner, Mary said in a deliberately cheerful voice. I'm sorry I couldn't help. Well, you're busy with work, Barbara's words contained sarcasm. Jennifer puts family first, so she can handle these important preparations. Mary bit her lip. Her mother seemed to have no understanding that she was raising her daughter alone and working hard to make a living. As the meal progressed, Barbara gradually shifted the topic to Mary's divorce issues. So, how are things with David? You still haven't finalized the divorce. Mom, please stop, Mary said in a quiet but firm voice, conscious that Amy was at the table. I'm just asking, Barbara waved her hand. It's natural to be concerned about my daughter's life. I understand being a single mother is difficult, but children need a father. Barbara, Robert raised his voice for the first time in a while. That's not an appropriate topic for tonight. However, Jennifer interrupted. But Mom's right. Steve and I have been married for 10 years, and we stay together for Madison's sake. Family requires compromise, doesn't it? Compromise? Mary's voice rose slightly. Even though you know David cheated twice, interfered with my career, and ran up debts. A heavy silence fell over the table. Amy pushed away her food and sat looking small. Mary came to her senses and gently stroked her daughter's shoulder. I'm sorry, Amy. Don't worry about the grown-up talk. But we're all going to Uncle Pete's place, right? Madison suddenly said. Mom told me. For Christmas lunch tomorrow. Mary looked at her mother in surprise. Uncle Pete? Mom, you invited him. Barbara shrugged. Of course. He's family. Pete was Barbara's brother who had once publicly stated that Mary's job was not suitable for women and had taken David's side in the divorce issue. Mary felt angry at this choice but didn't want to continue arguing in front of Amy. I'm looking forward to tomorrow morning, Robert suddenly said in a quiet voice. Everyone turned to him. Especially you two, Amy and Madison. Santa will surely bring you something wonderful. There was a strange light in his eyes. Mary sensed something like determination in his expression and felt momentarily anxious. Dad, are you okay? Mary asked again. Robert smiled gently. Yes, tomorrow will be an unforgettable Christmas. That much I promise. As bedtime approached, Amy nestled next to Mary, her eyes shining with anticipation for Christmas morning. Mom, do you think Santa will come tomorrow? Of course, Amy, Mary answered while stroking her daughter's hair. Anxiety spread in her chest. Mom, wake up. It's Christmas. Amy's excited voice woke Mary. The early morning light filtered through the curtains, filling the room with a pale glow. The clock showed 6:30. Amy, it's still early, Mary said sleepily, but her heart warmed at the expectation shining on her daughter's face. But I want to see if Santa came. Amy was already bouncing by the door in her pajamas, her small face filled with pure joy. Mary smiled and got up. She felt saved by her daughter's innocent appearance, which made her forget last night's tension. All right. But Grandma and the others might still be asleep, so be quiet. Grandpa is awake, Amy replied. I saw him making something in the kitchen. The two went downstairs. Indeed, the scent of coffee wafted from the kitchen. Colorful lights from the Christmas tree were visible from the downstairs living room. Amy. Merry Christmas. Robert came out of the kitchen and lifted his granddaughter. You're up early. Want to check if Santa came? Yes. Amy squirmed in her grandfather's arms. Can I go see? Of course, Robert put Amy down and handed Mary a coffee cup. You'll need this. Thank you, Dad. Mary took the cup and noticed something different in her father's expression. It was a complex look mixing determination, resolve, and a touch of sadness. Amy ran ahead into the living room. When Mary and Robert followed, Amy suddenly stopped in her tracks. Under the Christmas tree was an unimaginable quantity of presents piled high. Boxes of various sizes wrapped in colorful paper were arranged around the tree. However, all these gifts had tags that read, "To Madison." Madison's presents? Amy said in a small voice. Her eyes scanned around the tree. Where are mine? Mary felt her chest tighten as she placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Let's look. After searching around the tree, they finally found a small red stocking hung in an almost invisible place behind the tree. It had a tag that read, "To Amy." When Amy took the stocking, her expression was initially hopeful. However, after checking its contents, she found only a small candy cane and a few cheap-looking plastic hair clips inside. Amy's expression froze. She slowly looked around, comparing the mountain of presents for Madison with her small stocking. Understanding dawned in her young heart, and tears began to well in her eyes. Amy. Mary searched for words but found none. Amy tried hard to hold back at first, but suddenly large tears began streaming down her cheeks. She started crying quietly, but with uncontainable sadness. What's all this noise so early in the morning? Barbara, Jennifer, and Madison came downstairs. Madison was already wearing new satin pajamas, her hair perfectly styled. Merry Christmas! Madison shouted excitedly and rushed to the mountain of presents under the tree. Wow, amazing! Are they all for me? Yes, Santa brought them specially for Madison, Jennifer said proudly. Then Barbara noticed Amy still crying. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Amy didn't answer, just staring at the small stocking in her hand. The sound of Madison opening box after box and exclaiming with joy echoed through the room. Amy, what's wrong? Barbara's voice grew increasingly stern. Mom, you can see what's wrong, Mary said, restraining her anger. Madison has all these presents, while Amy has just one stocking. Barbara looked surprised for a moment but quickly hardened her expression. So that's the problem? Santa brings lots of presents to good children. Madison has achieved excellent grades all year and worked hard at ballet. Mom. Mary's voice trembled. How can you treat a child like this? At that moment, Amy's crying became a little louder. She dropped the stocking on the floor and covered her face with both hands. Barbara's face reddened with anger. What's with that attitude? Are you trying to embarrass us? She yelled at Amy. Crying at Christmas, what an ungrateful child. Mom, stop. Mary embraced Amy protectively. It's your bad parenting. Barbara shot back fiercely. Look at Jennifer. She's built a proper home and raised Madison properly. What are you? A half-baked mother who can't even get divorced. Jennifer stood beside her mother, wearing a cold smile. Sis, parenting is difficult, isn't it? But children need both a father and mother. Amy's behavioral problems might be because of that. Madison was opening her new tablet, wearing a malicious smile. Crybaby. Mary felt intense anger. How can you not understand that what you're doing is cruel? You're hurting a child's heart. Barbara suddenly started walking toward the kitchen. If there's no gratitude, this is appropriate. She opened the refrigerator and took out an egg carton. While everyone watched in confusion, Barbara took one egg and turned around. Mom, what are you doing? Mary asked with a sense of dread. Without answering, Barbara threw the egg at Amy. It hit her chest, broke, and spilled yolk and white over her pajamas and hair. A shocked silence spread through the room. Amy froze in fear and surprise, just staring at her clothes. Mary trembled with anger and took a step toward her mother. Barbara. Mary called her mother by name. How could you do such a thing? As she was about to move toward her mother, Robert, who had been silent for a long time, stepped forward and said in a quiet but dignified voice. That's my gift. Everyone stared at him in confusion. What do you mean, Robert? Barbara asked in a shaken voice. Robert took a smartphone from his pocket and showed the screen. I've been recording everything that just happened, including Barbara's violent act. He approached Amy and gently began wiping the egg from her face with a handkerchief. I'm sorry, Amy. Grandpa was a little late. But it's okay, now. The color drained from Barbara and Jennifer's faces. Madison hid anxiously behind her mother. Robert, what are you planning to do? Barbara's voice was trembling. For 40 years, I've watched in silence. Robert's voice was quiet, but his eyes were cold as ice. What you've done to Mary, and now to Amy too. Enough is enough. He turned to Mary and smiled. You're a wonderful mother. And I'm proud of you. Amy, the real Christmas starts now. Robert opened a large closet in the corner of the living room. Inside were many wrapped boxes that had been hidden. The real presents from Santa are right here. A heavy silence filled the room. Barbara and Jennifer were at a loss for words, transfixed by Robert's actions. Mary watched her father with disbelief as she comforted the sobbing Amy. "Robert, you must be joking?" Barbara said in a trembling voice. "Recording family issues." "This is no joke," Robert interrupted in a quiet but resolute voice. He headed to his study and gestured for everyone to please follow. Mary took Amy's hand and whispered, "It's okay, let's go see." Amy nodded, though her shoulders still trembled. In the study, Robert opened a drawer in his large desk and took out a brown envelope. "Mary, I want you to have this." When Mary opened the envelope, it contained legal documents. They were divorce papers with detailed instructions for property division with Barbara. As she read through the documents, Mary's eyes widened. "Dad, this is..." "I've been in contact with David and prepared all the documents he needed to sign," Robert began explaining. "All that's left is your signature. Also, I'm proceeding with my divorce from Barbara. I've arranged for most of the property to go to you and Amy." Barbara turned pale and collapsed into a chair. "Robert, what are you doing? 40 years of marriage." "For 40 years, I've pretended not to see." Robert's voice was filled with sadness, but his determination was unwavering. "How you've always been critical of Mary and favored her sister." "I was weak. I couldn't stand up. But today's events strengthened my resolve." Robert took out a tablet and tapped the screen. It displayed a list of video clips with dates and times. "These are records I've kept for the past 3 years. Evidence of the psychological abuse and verbal insults Barbara and Jennifer have inflicted on Mary and Amy." Mary gasped. "Dad, you've been..." "I couldn't forgive myself for failing to protect my daughter and granddaughter." Tears welled in Robert's eyes. "Mary, I'm sorry. I should have acted sooner." Amy approached her grandfather and took his hand. "Grandpa, don't cry." Robert gently embraced Amy. "Amy, I need to apologize to you too. But it's going to be okay, now." He stood up and said, "Wait a moment," then left the room. A few minutes later, he returned carrying several large boxes. "These are the real Christmas presents." Robert placed the boxes in front of Amy. Amy timidly opened the first box. Inside was the high-quality art supply set she had long wanted. The next box contained a beautiful collection of books, and the final large box held a gleaming new bicycle in disassembled form. "Grandpa." Amy was speechless. "Grandpa has been watching you all along," Robert smiled gently. "Your talent and kindness. How you always try your best quietly." Jennifer's face reddened with anger and confusion. "Dad, how could you do this? Mom and I have always treasured you." "That's the problem." Robert looked at Jennifer with stern eyes. "You treasured me, but you were only taking advantage of my weakness. You satisfied your sense of superiority by belittling Mary and Amy." Barbara stood up and protested vehemently. "Robert, you're not in your right mind. We were a fine family. Mary ruined everything. With that failed marriage, raising a single-parent child." "Enough." Robert's voice resonated through the room. He took a small box from his pocket and handed it to Mary. "This is also a gift for you." When Mary opened the box, inside was a shiny new key. "This is..." "A key to a new house," Robert smiled. "I purchased it for you and Amy. It's in a good area of town. Close to Amy's new school. You won't need to struggle paying rent anymore." Mary was speechless, staring at her father. "Dad, why?" "I'm sorry for staying silent all this time." Robert took a deep breath. "I was weak. But since Amy was born, as I connected with her pure heart, I realized my mistakes. There's poison in this house. I couldn't ignore it anymore." He walked toward Mary and Amy. "A real family treasures and protects each other. It's not too late." Barbara and Jennifer protested vigorously, but Robert was unmoved. "Legal proceedings have already begun. Mary, I don't want you and Amy to suffer anymore." Amy asked in a small voice, "Mom, are we going to the new house?" Mary stroked Amy's head and answered, "Yes, it's a new beginning." "Is Madison coming too?" Amy looked at her cousin with innocent eyes. The room fell silent again. Madison was hiding behind her mother, but confusion and fear were visible in her eyes. After a moment of deep thought, Robert quietly said, "Family isn't determined by blood alone. It's bound by trust and love. Jennifer, Madison, you have an opportunity to change too. But you must choose it yourselves." "Robert, are you insane? Ending 40 years of marriage like this? Shameless." Barbara's scream-like voice echoed through the study. Her hair was disheveled, her face contorted with anger. "Dad, why are you betraying us?" Jennifer also denounced her father, and Madison began crying in confusion. "Mom, what's happening?" Robert stood by the window, gazing at the snowy landscape outside as he quietly answered, "This isn't a sudden decision. For years, I've watched your behavior. The cold attitude toward Mary, the discriminatory treatment of Amy." He slowly turned around and surveyed everyone in the room. "I've already consulted with lawyers. Barbara, I'm prepared to take legal action regarding your unfair treatment." At those words, the color drained from Barbara and Jennifer's faces. They seemed to finally begin understanding the seriousness of the situation now that Robert was considering legal measures. "But, what will happen to us?" Jennifer's voice was trembling. "That depends on you," Robert answered in a somewhat softer tone. "If you have the will to change, I suggest family counseling. But from today, your attitude toward Mary and Amy must change." In her father's figure, Mary saw strength standing up for them for the first time. Long-suppressed emotions welled up, and tears formed in her eyes. "Dad." She searched for words, but couldn't find any that adequately expressed her gratitude. Robert placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. "I hope you don't think it's too late. I couldn't forgive myself for turning a blind eye for so long. But even now, I want to protect you and Amy." Amy quietly took her grandfather's hand and said in a small voice, "Grandpa, thank you." Months later, the spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Mary and Amy's new home. The divorce was finalized, and Barbara and Jennifer had fallen on hard economic times. Without Robert's income, they could no longer maintain their luxurious lifestyle. Jennifer had to cut back on expenses for Madison too, and ballet lessons were reduced to once a week. Ironically, through this experience, she had gradually begun to recognize her mistakes. She had tried to contact Mary several times, though they hadn't yet reached a full reconciliation. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. When Mary opened it, Jennifer stood there with Madison. "Mary, can we talk for a bit?" Jennifer's voice no longer had its former arrogance, it had become somewhat humble. Mary hesitated slightly but invited them into the house. At first, Amy seemed tense seeing Madison, but when she received Madison's letter of apology and a small gift, a handmade bracelet, she gradually began to warm up. "I heard from Robert," Jennifer said as she sat on the living room sofa, accepting a coffee. "He started family therapy. Could we join too?" Mary was surprised, but saw genuine regret in her sister's eyes. "Of course. Dad would be delighted." A year later, Mary and Amy were living peacefully in their new home with Robert. At Robert's suggestion, everyone, including Barbara, had begun participating in the family therapy. Barbara's change took the longest time, but gradually she abandoned her stubbornness and began confronting her mistakes. Her showing genuine interest in Amy's artistic talents was a significant step. "Grandma, look." Amy proudly showed her painting. It was a picture of the family gathered around a Christmas tree. "That's wonderful, Amy," Barbara exclaimed with sincere admiration. Unlike her previous fake praise, this time her words contained truth. In the living room, a Christmas tree decorated together by Madison and Amy sparkled. The relationship between the two girls had improved gradually, and they now occasionally played together. Robert stood by the fireplace, looking over the entire family. "Love is a choice, demonstrated by daily actions," he spoke quietly. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to re-examine the meaning of family." Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, Mary stood by the window, looking up at the starry sky. Life had changed in a direction she couldn't have imagined a year ago. One courageous action had changed the unhealthy family dynamics that had persisted for decades. Amy slept under the new Christmas tree, this time surrounded by genuine affection. A peaceful smile adorned her face. Mary gently closed the door and headed to her own room. Tomorrow would be a new day. And the days ahead would be filled with true family bonds based on truth and love.